Hey everyone, before we get into today's show, I have something so exciting to share with all of you. And that is that I am starting work on my next book, which is going to explore something that is a little bit terrifying and something that makes me very uncomfortable, and that is vulnerability. And the reason why this terrifies me and makes me uncomfortable is because I am not a vulnerable person. I'm specifically going to be looking at vulnerability and leadership. But here is the best part. I want to include you in the book. I am looking for stories, insights, and experiences from all of you leaders out there who have been vulnerable at work, whether that ended up helping or hurting you. If you want to be featured in my upcoming book and a soon-to-be released podcast exploring vulnerability and leadership, then please take a few minutes to answer some questions that you can find at thevulnerabiliesurvey.com. Again, that's thevulnerabiliesurvey.com. I will be sharing much more on this in the coming weeks and months, but for now, I'm looking forward to reading what you have to say about vulnerability and leadership.
People see a fake coming a mile away, okay? And I think being authentic is understanding who you are and sticking to your core values and, growing and learning and getting better at what you are, but don't try to be somebody that you're not, okay? And I think that's an essential leadership trait.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Future of Work. My guest today is David Novak. He is the former CEO of Yum Brands, and he's responsible for taking Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC from $4 billion to $32 billion. He's also the author of a new book called Take Charge of You: How Self-Coaching Can Transform Your Life and Career. David, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm looking forward to this.
And a lot of people might not know this, but we actually spoke a few times. I interviewed you for my book, The Future Leader, and I've been trying to get you on this podcast for what feels like forever. So I'm glad that we were finally able to make it happen. So thank you for joining me.
I apologize for being so difficult.
We've exchanged tweets, we've exchanged messages, and now finally we get to meet face to face.
Yeah. Well, let's make it worth the while. Okay?
Yes. Before we get into talking about some of the stuff that you're involved in now, I wanted to go kind of way back because I was reading some stuff about you. And I read that you actually grew up in trailer parks when you were younger. By 7th grade, you lived in 23 different states. Can you take us back to David when you were just a young kid and what your life was like?
Yeah, well, my dad was a government surveyor. So he was in a surveying party, and we went from small town to small town, and he would establish the longitude and latitude points that, by the way, today helped to create the GPS system. He didn't know it at the time. But anyway, we all lived in trailers, and every 3 months we'd go from one small town to another. Jacob, I'm probably the only person you know that ever lived in Dodge City, Kansas, but I actually lived in Dodge City twice. But I never lived on the East Coast, never on the West Coast. It was always up and down the Midwest, and I lived in places like Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, Kimmel, Nebraska, Fremont, Texas, Chama, New Mexico, tiny little towns. But it was really sort of an idyllic childhood because I moved my neighborhood with me every 3 months. We just go to my dad would hook up his government truck to the trailer, and we'd go to the next trailer park, and my mom would check me into schools and say, hey, you better make some friends because we're leaving, Yeah. and so, I really had to learn how to, work through the anxieties of new situations. Learned how to, I think it really helped me build some people skills that really ended up being advantageous for me in my business career.
It must have also been pretty hard for you though, right? I mean, as a young kid, you're trying to make friends, and as soon as you make friends, you got to move. Yeah. I mean, did you feel constantly lonely when you were younger?
No, I really didn't, because I moved my neighborhood with me. There were like 15 other families that moved. So your neighborhood went with you. And I kind of thought everybody did it. I never really felt disadvantaged. people said, how did you, succeed in spite of your how did you succeed with your upbringing? And I think I succeeded because of my upbringing. I think it ended up being a great advantage for me.
So how do you go from living in these different trailer parks to becoming the CEO? I mean, what was that career path and trajectory like? Did you always know that you wanted to get involved in business, or take us through 7-year-old David up to CEO David?
Well, it's one of those things that obviously I never ever envisioned. But I do say that my biggest break in life was being born in the United States and being the son of Charles and Jean Novak. So, my mom and dad both had high school educations, and all they wanted for me was to live the American dream.
Yeah.
All they wanted for me was to get a college education and have a better opportunity than them. So their big goal was to get me that college education. Now, along the way, though, they were absolutely great parents. My mom was my first coach. I think she, was always there for me, always gave me good advice. My dad was sort of the standard bearer of the family, coached my little league teams and did a lot of stuff. But I had such loving parents. And, I did grow up in the United States, and I think the best of the United States, the Midwest, the small town America, I really got a sense of just real people, being real, being genuine, being authentic. I went to the University of Missouri. I went to journalism school. And when I went to journalism school there, I took some advertising and marketing courses, and I absolutely loved it. So I went from being a mediocre student to a 4.0 student,
Wow.
because I found my passion. I found something that I was really good at, and I loved it. And, I said, I'm going to go into marketing and advertising. So I graduated in 1974, and people talk about how bad things are today with the economy and, all the issues that we have. But 1974, inflation was like, 15 to 20%. It was terrible. Interest rates were through the roof. There's the oil embargo. Gas prices were going crazy. There were gas lines. Couldn't get gas. Unemployment was down. So if you got out of school, you weren't assured of a job. And especially if you were in marketing and and advertising, everybody wants to hire somebody who has experience.
Yep.
And I didn't have any experience. So the first job I got out of college was I was an advertising copywriter for a small agency in Washington, D.C. And that was great because, I learned that there's nothing more sobering than looking at a blank sheet of paper and you've got to come up with the idea. You've got to then sell the idea. And, it really taught me a lot. And I loved it. I mean, I read everything I could about advertising. I read every awards book that you could read. I just loved it. But I realized that I was a creative person. But I realized that I wanted to be on the business side of advertising. So I wanted to get into account work. So I left this tiny little agency in Washington, sent out 25 resumes to the top 25 advertising agencies in the country. And the first one to answer me back was Ketchum McLeod & Grove, which was not in New York, interestingly enough, but was in Pittsburgh. Wow. So I go to Pittsburgh, and they hired me to be the account executive on Rockwell Power Tools, which, I didn't have any experience in account work. This was a big leap, but I really worked for a guy who was from Procter & Gamble, who taught me everything he knew about marketing. He took me under his wing. He was fantastic. Then I got on the Heinz 57 sauce. So then I said, okay, now I want to get on a bigger, more sophisticated account. So I'm going to be in advertising. I'm going to be in an agency business. I need to go to New York. That's where you got to make it in advertising. So I go up to New York, interview up there, 4 or 5 different agencies, got job offers, but I felt like a duck out of water. I mean, I didn't feel comfortable in New York. I didn't have an MBA. It seemed like everybody had an MBA, and I felt like that was going to hold me back there. I felt like, people would judge me because I didn't have an MBA. And around that time, I got another phone call from a headhunter that asked me to go to Dallas and interview at this agency called Tracy Locke, which had the Frito-Lay account. And I was interviewed for the account executive job for Tostitos, which I'm sure you've had plenty of Tostitos.
Of course. And so you were in your mid 30s at this point?
No, I'm just, at that point, I'm probably 25, 26 years old,
Wow. Okay.
because I got right out. So now I go to Dallas, and I work my way up at Tracy Locke to run the Frito-Lay account. I was the management supervisor on the Frito-Lay business, which included Doritos, Lay's, Sun Chips, Tostitos. It was a big account. And Frito-Lay was a part of PepsiCo. And so, I had great relationships with the president of Frito-Lay, the senior VP of marketing Frito-Lay, and they asked me if I would consider going to Pizza Hut, which was also a part of PepsiCo. They had Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC. They said, would you go to Pizza Hut and be the chief marketing officer for Pizza Hut?
In your 20s?
At that time, I was like 28, 29 years old.
And they asked you to be the chief marketing officer?
Yeah. So I went, I'd say I was 9 years. I might have been 30, 31, actually. It's right around there. I was young. Okay?
Super young.
Yeah, I was young. And so I went and interviewed with Steve Reineman, who later became the chairman of PepsiCo. And he hired me that day. He offered me the job that day. Went back, talked to my wife about it.
Wait, you're skipping over the interesting. How did you get the job in one day? What did you say? Companies now, they interview, it takes them months to find a single candidate. You got it in 24 hours. Why'd you get it?
Well, it's kind of funny. Every job that I've ever interviewed, I got it basically a job offer that day. I don't know why it happened, but it happened that day. I got picked up at the airport by Steve Reineman. Steve actually carried my bags, and I'm going, geez, this guy is really the most humble guy in the world, or he really needs a marketing guy. And the fact of the matter was, both of those statements were true. He really needed somebody to come in there and help him grow the business. And, I just told him what my experience was. I told him what I knew, what I didn't know. I said, look, I've never done a pricing analysis. This is, he says, we have people that can do that. I said, what I'm good at is I know consumers, I know advertising, I have a great sense of urgency, and I know how to lead people.
Yep.
And I can work with you, and I can help you grow this business. And by the way, when I was running the Frito-Lay account, I did a lot more than just advertising. I came up with the idea for Cool Ranch Doritos. I developed that product with their head of R&D. I did a lot of annual operating plans for.
You came up with Cool Ranch Doritos?
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of my big things.
The world thanks you. Those are delicious.
Yeah, they're good. They are absolutely great. And I could talk more about that later if you want. But anyway, and he had heard a lot about me from the Frito-Lay guys. So I came highly recommended. Plus, the chairman of PepsiCo at the time, Wayne Calloway, knew me very well and recommended me highly. So I think because of those reasons, he said, and we hit it off. I mean, it was just like, the minute we started talking, it was like we were simpatico. I knew I could work with him. Yep. He knew he would like working with me. And, we just bonded immediately, and we still have a friendship to this day. So he made me that job offer. So I go to Pizza Hut. We turned the business around. We made Domino's. Domino's was the number one delivery chain. We launched delivery. We overtook Domino's in delivery share. We turned around the business. We doubled our sales, and profits in 4 years. And then we also had developed this campaign called Making It Great, which was, at that time, was a great marketing campaign, advertising campaign. And we put all kinds of substance around it. We brought all kinds of news to the consumer. And PepsiCo had a big meeting where every one of the division presidents presented what they were doing at each one of their divisions. So Steve got up and basically presented all the marketing that I've done. And so right after it was over, Roger Enrico came up and said, David, you're coming to Pepsi. At that time, he was the chairman of PepsiCo. And he says, you're coming to Pepsi. I want you to run marketing and sales for Pepsi. So I got that job. And, I went there. And after a couple of years, I took over as chief operating officer for Pepsi-Cola Company. That gave me the broader business experience I needed. And then I got offered the opportunity to go to KFC and be the president of KFC. And then, interestingly enough, Jacob, I get this call from Roger Enrico again, and he says, look, I'd like you to go be the CEO of Frito-Lay. And I said, well, let me think about it. I thought about it, and I called him back and said, I just don't want to do that. I don't want to be the CEO of Frito-Lay because, I thought about what really gives me joy, what I loved, and it was the restaurant business. I love the restaurant business. I love food. I love marketing. I love people. So I said no. And I didn't know at the time, Jacob, that PepsiCo was in the midst of thinking through how they were going to spin off the restaurants. So when I said no to Frito-Lay, they also gave me Pizza Hut. So I started running KFC and Pizza Hut. And so when they spun off the restaurants in 1997, I was running 2 of the 3 brands and was in position to be, the top operating guy of the company. And that's how I got started at Yum Brands. Our name then at the time was Tricon, which was one of the worst names in the history of business. It was supposed to mean 3 icons, but nobody ever got that.
Yeah.
But we did have a great ticker symbol, which is Yum. And when I became CEO 2 years later, I changed the name to Yum. But anyway, it was a very interesting ride. All I did was do one job at a time, do it as good as I could do it, look around and see who had the next job, figure out what they had that I didn't have, and then I tried to develop those skills and so that I could be in position to get promoted and take that job when that job would open up. And I just climbed up the ladder that way. And I had a big breakthrough because I made a big quantum leap when I went from being the management supervisor of Frito-Lay to being the head of marketing for Pizza Hut. That was a huge break.
Yeah, that's a crazy jump. I mean, I'm trying to obviously hearing you talk about it just seems like, yeah, it's natural. I didn't do anything crazy. I just kind of worked hard. But I think for most people listening, the idea of going from a supervisor to being the chief marketing officer at some point in your late 20s, early 30s is pretty crazy. And in hearing you tell this story, it seems like in each situation, you were a little bit in over your head. You were taking jobs that made you uncomfortable, maybe jobs that you didn't have all the skills for yet, but you were willing to learn. How did you move up? I mean, what was it about you that people saw that they kept wanting to put you in positions that allowed you to grow and stretch? Because, surely you were around a lot of other smart people. And, when there was a position that was open for a chief marketing officer, they probably considered a lot of people, not just you. Why did you keep getting these positions and not anybody else around you?
I think the biggest separator for me was my ability to influence and motivate people. I was always able to, when you get your first job, you got to sell somebody that you have the capability to build the experience to be successful at it.
Yeah.
Okay. When you get your next job, you've got to you've got to do your first job really well. Okay. And then as you've done it, you've got to build relationships and belief in other people so that they'll take a shot and give you the opportunity to move to the next thing. And I think I had an incredible work ethic. I mean, I used to get up at 5 o'clock, get to work by 6, and go home, at 8, 9 o'clock. It's like I just worked. I loved working. I never felt like I was working, but it was like, because I loved what I was doing. It was always my hobby. I think the fact that I got in an area that I really loved and was really good at it, I was very good at marketing and advertising. I mean, the bottom line is you got to be good at something. My basic functional skill was really, really good. And I worked really hard at getting better and better at it because I loved it. And then I always believed in managing 2 up and 2 down. I think you got to manage the person that you work for and the person that he or she works for. Okay. And anytime you get in with that person that's 2 up, you need to talk to them about what you would do if you had their job. You give them some ideas on what you would do, what they could do to be more effective. So I never, ever went into those situations without thinking about how I could impress that person that I had capability, that I had more potential. And I think as a result of that, people put me into big spots earlier than you might think. And I managed two down too. I always felt like I needed to manage the people that work for me really well, so they really loved working for me. And then I tried to go to the front line and learn what was going on there, so that I could take that to bear as well. So, I think that's that's probably the reason why I moved forward. It's people saw potential because I never really looked at myself in the job I was in. I always acted like I had the capability and wanted to have the next job, but I didn't do it in an overly zealous kind of way.
Yeah, I love that. Well, did you ever make mistakes during this process?
Oh my God.
In fact, what was the biggest mistake that you made? Did you ever cost the company millions of dollars?
I made, I think when you have a lot of success and you have put a lot of wins on the board, like when I went to Pizza Hut, I came up with a specialty line of pizzas, the Lover's lines that still exist today. We did Land Before Time puppets, which nobody had ever done kid marketing besides McDonald's. And I said, why let McDonald's do that by themselves? Let's do it ourselves. That was a home run. I did these little mini basketballs where you put a tie-in with the NCAA and the Final Four, where the side of the NCAA was on it. It's like it was a home run. I did Kids Night is Tuesday night. I mean, I did all these things with my team. I mean, I say it was we. We came up with, and I had a great team. I had the best marketing team, okay, of any team at PepsiCo, and we were based in Wichita, Kansas. And I think one of the interesting things about that was that, people will work anywhere if they see growth and they see someone that can inspire them, and they feel that it's going to care about them and help them be the best that they can be. And they'll go anywhere to be a part of that. And that's what happened. But we had a lot of success. Now, when you have a lot of success, you can start to think that everything you're going to do is going to work. So the biggest marketing mistake I made when I was at Pizza Hut was this program where we tied in with Back to the Future 2. And we created these solar shades. They were sunglasses that were really modern, hip, and they were supposed to be featured in the movie, prominently featured in the movie. And Michael J. Fox was supposed to wear it. Everybody was supposed to, wear them. They were supposed to be all over the movie. Well, I stood up before the launch and said, we are going to sell 9 million pairs of sunglasses in our stores, okay? And that'll make us the largest manufacturer of sunglasses, okay? But we're going to use our outlets, and we're going to do it because we're going to sell them for like 99 cents or something like that. And then I remember thinking to myself, geez, that's a lot of sunglasses we ordered, okay? And so we launched them, and Back to the Future came out in December. Back to the Future 2. It was delayed from like October to December. And it was a terrible blizzard. It was awful. But worse yet, it was the worst, coldest winter in the Midwest. Worse yet, though, when we watched the movie, the sunglasses, the solar shades ended up on a cutting room floor, okay, editing floor. They were nowhere to be found. They were just in a few little spots, like people working out in the back of the movie. You wouldn't know that there was a solar shade. You would have no idea. There was no tie-in whatsoever. So we launched this promotion, and literally it was a disaster, okay, because nobody wanted these things, okay. They were stupid. We thought they were cool. They weren't cool. We thought we were going to sell a ton of them. We didn't sell a ton of them. They didn't drive traffic, and worse yet, it was the coldest winter on record. And I remember going to Chicago, and I was talking to a restaurant manager, and I was saying, what do you? Is there anything you think we should be doing? He says, yeah, you need to go find that guy who came up with this solar shades promotion and fire his ass. Okay. Well, that guy was me. Okay. but I was able to get through it. We ended up having to sell those sunglasses through bartering, and it took us a while to get rid of them, but it was a pain. And it was just, it was an embarrassing thing because we'd been on such a run, but we failed.
Yeah.
But the good news was, everything else is really working, and on balance, the performance was good. My biggest failure at PepsiCo, at Pepsi, when I was running marketing at Pepsi, was Crystal Pepsi, which I've talked about many, many times. But I was the inventor of Crystal Pepsi, which was a clear Pepsi, launched in 1992.
I remember that.
It was the biggest idea I thought I ever had in my life. But it didn't taste enough like Pepsi, didn't have enough Pepsi notes to it, and so it became a gigantic in and out product. So the big failure was not that we didn't make money on it. We did, because the Pepsi-Cola bottlers priced it at a premium because they didn't think it'd have a lot of repeat. Okay, so everybody made a lot of money, and they were right. And the reason they told me that it was not going to do well because it didn't taste enough like Pepsi, and we were calling it Crystal Pepsi, but I didn't listen to them. I was a heat-seeking missile. This had gotten great rave reviews. Product of the year that year, 1992. It was like this was going to be the rage in 1993. Was featured on CBS Sunday News, Evening News by Dan Rather. It was like a home run idea, and I thought that everybody didn't really get how great an idea it was. And it was a great idea. Everybody tried it, but they didn't come back and try it again because it didn't taste enough like Pepsi.
Yeah.
But we made a ton of money on it. Okay, because it was premium price. So that was probably the reason why I didn't get fired there.
Interesting.
And we did some other good things too. But that was I had some failures along the way. Those are two.
I don't know if you remember. I mean, and I know you shared this story a few times. It's one of my favorite stories that a CEO has shared with me. And it's the story when you were at Pepsi Cola, and the Bob story, which I'll leave it at that. But I thought maybe can you share that Bob story? And what happened? Because I think when I asked you this, I said, what was the most impactful moment during the course of your leadership career? And this is what you told me. And I'd love it if you could share directly from yourself.
Yeah. Well, this is a seminal story in my career. And it really transformed my whole approach to leadership and led me to, I think, a real breakthrough in business that was best practiced by a lot of other leaders. But I became the chief operating officer for Pepsi-Cola Company, and the problem, Jacob, was that I was a really good marketing person, but I'd never done anything in operations. Okay, so I knew, I had to beg my boss to get the job. Okay, and I told him, you can put me in this job, and if I don't do it well, you can fire me in 6 months or put me back into marketing. But I gotta demonstrate that I'm capable of being more than just a marketing guy. So my strategy was to learn from the people who knew what was going on in operations. Okay, so I met with all the top operators in the country, and we developed what the real problems were, and then we decided to develop new processes to improve the bottling operations, and we did. And I didn't know anything about operations, but I went to the people who did. So the other thing that I did is I left on Mondays and came back on Saturdays, and I went out and had roundtables. And roundtables are where you get together with 10 to 12 people in the morning at the plant. Around 6 o'clock, I'd bring coffee and donuts, and you ask people what's working, what's not working. So I go to St. Louis, and I'm in St. Louis, and I asked a group of route salesmen. Now, the route salesman's number one job at Pepsi. These are the guys that drive the trucks, go in, get the shelf space, make sure the point of purchase is great, handle the customers. They're critical. They get all that up and down the street business, and it's the most profitable for Pepsi. And they're just really an important driver of the company's success. And so and merchandising is the key thing that they do. It's like getting the facings up properly, getting point of purchase up, making sure that the customer's happy, all this. So I said, tell me about merchandising to these 12 guys. And they all started raving about this guy named Bob. Bob's sitting directly across the table from me. He says, well, listen, if you want to know about merchandising and what's working, talk to Bob. Bob taught me more in 4 hours than I learned in my first 3 years here. Bob is so good. You should see him with customers. You go into Bob's stores, you will see the facings, the bottles, the displays look fantastic. The facings are great. Nobody's better than Bob. He is amazing. And I look across the table, and Bob is crying. And I say, Bob, why are you crying? And he said, David, I've been in this company for 47 years. I'm retiring in 2 weeks, and I didn't know that people felt this way about me. Well, that just hit me in the gut. I mean, it was like, it was just so amazing to me that here's this guy who was better than everybody else, retiring in 2 weeks, and he didn't know how good he was. And then I was thinking to myself, geez, this guy's obviously the best at what he does. Just think if people would have really paid attention to what he did.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he could have even done more things. But it said to me that from that day forward, I was going to make sure that I did everything I could in whatever organization I am to recognize the Bobs in the world.
Yeah.
So I made from that point on recognition of frontline employees, okay, the number one driver, behavioral driver of any culture that I was a part of building from that point on. And, you know, I'm so glad I did. When I look at Bob, I see my mom and dad, you know. Yeah. My mom and dad busted their butts. They were great. They were smart. They could have been a CEO. They're as smart as me, you know, but they didn't have the coaching. They didn't have the education. They didn't have the opportunity that I had. Okay. And so, but when I look at the frontline people out there, there are a lot of people like my mom and dad and Bob, and they deserve to be recognized. Yep. And that was a major driver.
Well, let's talk a little bit about coaching. I mean, I'm assuming throughout your career, you've had to do a lot of self-coaching to kind of get to where you are. And, you know, a lot of people, as you talk about, they can't afford to, or they don't have access to a coach. And sometimes you got to be your own coach. Right. Can you talk a little bit about what does that mean? How does that work? I mean, where do you begin even with being your own coach? Yeah,
well, it's interesting. You know, I do my own podcast, Jacob. It's called How Leaders Lead with David Novak, and I interview all kinds of CEOs and leading sports figures like Tom Brady and, you know, Steve Kerr and different people in that domain as well. And the interesting thing is, everybody I interview has high self-awareness. Okay, and I think that self-awareness that they have, okay, has made them really good self-coaches because they realize what their strengths are and they play to them, and they realize what their areas of opportunities are, and they make sure that they don't derail themselves by not learning, you know, what they need to learn to make sure that they're at least competent in that particular area. And so I think that self-coaching really starts with the conversation that you have to have with yourself. You know, you got to ask yourself key questions. You know, what are your strengths? What are your areas of opportunities? What gives you joy? What's your joy builders? What's your joy blockers? Figuring that out, figuring out what your single biggest thing is, envisioning what destination that you really want to go towards. But that all starts with this high self-awareness of what makes you tick. And so what we've tried to do in this book, and I teamed up with a sports performance coach, Jason Goldsmith, who worked with Jason Day and Justin Rose, who helped them become number one in the world in golf. And he's one of my best friends. What we've tried to do is give people the tools and exercises and thought processes they can use so that they can have that kind of conversation with themselves, so that they can, really develop an action plan that will help them achieve the single biggest thing that will help them transform their life and their career. And so, the critical thing, though, to answer your question, going back to the beginning, is you got to have high self-awareness.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can go over maybe one of the tools or resources or the mental shifts. I know the book isn't out yet. It's coming out very soon, actually. What's the actual date of release?
March 22nd.
March 22nd. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe you can give us a little teaser, a thought process, a framework or tool, something that we can start doing that would allow us to be better self-coaches.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because everybody talks about the Great Resignation today. Okay. So you can resign, but what are you going to go to? Okay, it's one thing to resign, but are you going to go to something that's going to truly make you happier? Okay. So, one of the things we talk about is starting out by just listing your joy blockers. What is it that takes away your joy when
Yeah.
you think about what you do? Then write down what are the things that are your joy builders. Okay, write them all down. And then read them and then think about, okay, how am I spending my time? If you're spending your time over in that area where there's lots of joy blockers, you're not going to be very happy, And if you've got, if you can really crystallize what gives you joy, then you can say, okay, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life, I got to figure out how to make that happen for myself. Like that's what happened to me, early on in college is when I learned that, God, I love marketing and advertising. Okay. That was it. Once I learned that, that's where I was going to focus on my joy. You talk to Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett has written a book. It's like tap dance to work. Why does he tap dance to work? Because he loves finance. He loves business. He's not working. Okay. This is his hobby. Okay. But, what we try to do is coach people into figuring out what is it that gives them joy, and then figuring out how they can develop an action plan that can get them to spend more of their time in that area. And, I think that's one tool. The other thing is on self-awareness. One of the things I did and continue to do every year is I do what I call the 3x5 exercise. On one side of the 3x5 card, I write, what am I today? Okay. And the other side, I write, what do I need to be tomorrow? Okay. And so I might write down like, I'm passionate and enthusiastic. Well, that's a great thing when you're a CEO to be passionate and enthusiastic. But what do I have to be tomorrow? I got to temper my passion and enthusiasm because I can scare the hell out of people. Okay. Because I can get so excited about my ideas that I can overwhelm people. Okay. When on a technical skill side, I came up as a traditional marketer, great at TV ads, consumer insights, print ads, but digital was happening. So tomorrow, what do I have to be tomorrow? I got to be good at digital marketing. I got to be great at social marketing. So what I did after that, after going through that process, is I found the number one person in social media and digital in our company, Tressie Lieberman, and I had her reverse mentor me on social media and digital, and I mentored her on leadership. But what I'm saying is that going through that 3x5 exercise, what are you today? What do you need to be tomorrow? And then keeping that front and center, I think is really critical. In fact, I put it on my refrigerator. I have it on my refrigerator. I look at it every day. I do it every year. And when I was running Young Brands, I had like the top 50 people in the company. I did one-on-one coaching sessions once a quarter with, and they each did their 3x5 card. And so I would always go through how they were doing on their 3x5 card, and then we get into their actual business objectives and what they were working on. Because I think, you've got to look at yourself as almost you're like a diamond. You got all this potential in you. You got to keep polishing the diamond, making yourself better and better as you go forward. So those are a couple of things that we talk about in the book.
Okay.
We also talk about mindset. So many people talk about, I haven't done this. Well, we just say add one word at the end of the statement, yet. Okay. Just change your mindset that you haven't done it yet. Okay. Well, I've never broken 70 in golf yet. Okay. Give yourself the possibility of growth and being able to do things that you never ever thought you could do.
And I think one important thing is you said the kind of the joy blockers, and the things that basically give you joy, but it doesn't mean that you aren't going to have any joy blockers during your career, right? It's not like 100% of it has to be all joy. You will always have some joy blockers. You will always have to do some things you don't want to do or things that bother you or annoy you. Would you say that's a fair statement, or are you saying that everything always needs to be joy?
No, absolutely. I think there's a totally fair statement. You're going to have things, a lot of times you're going to be working in an area that doesn't necessarily give you the joy, but you have to do it. Okay. you might be, you might love marketing like me. And that's boy, when you got a new product meeting or, you're going to get to taste all these great things, you just can't wait to get there and do that. But when you got to sit down and do a financial presentation, or go through a big heavy analysis, if you're more right brain than left brain, it's not going to be as much fun for you, but it's part of the job requirement.
Yeah.
Like one of the ways how I self-coached myself, I had never really worked with the investment community. So when I became CEO of Yum Brands, I said, who can I learn from there? I mean, who could help me? And so I used my contacts and I set up a meeting with Warren Buffett. And, I thought if anybody could teach me how to talk to shareholders, it could be Warren Buffett. And I learned a ton from Warren Buffett on how to do that. And he taught me the importance of CEOs being sober salesmen. You want to love your baby. You want to be really excited about it, but you also want to talk about the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. He said, that's what's going to give you credibility. And that's kind of like the joy blockers. It isn't like the thing that you really love, but you got to do it to be successful.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm curious about something tangential related to this, and that's the topic of vulnerability, because it seems like to connect with people, to motivate them, to engage them, to manage 2 up and 2 down, you need to have a certain level of vulnerability. And just hearing you talk, it sounds like you had that level of vulnerability, because when you were asked to do things that you didn't know how to do, you were pretty upfront and said, look, I don't know how to do this. I'm really good at doing this stuff. I've never done this before. Can you talk about the role that vulnerability played in your success over your career?
Yeah. Well, the CEOs that I talk to in my podcast, they have an uncanny combination of confidence and humility. Okay. The confidence, you're not going to be a great leader if you can't give people a sense that you know where you're going and that you're going to help people get there, and you got to have a degree of confidence. But at the same time, the humility is critical, because the humility says, I need you. I can't do it by myself. You know what I don't know. Okay. And I think when the CEOs or leaders say, I need you, you know what I don't know, man, that's when you get everybody to follow you. Yeah. See, nobody really wants to follow somebody who's perfect. There's, if you think you're perfect and you act like you're perfect and you're all knowing, people can't stand you. They can't wait to get rid of you. You're a jerk. Okay. People want to follow people who are the real deal. Yeah. I mean, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, I guarantee you, he is as smart as they come, but if he screws up, he tells people he screws up. If he doesn't know something, he'll tell people, I need you to help me learn it. And, people will follow this guy to the moon because he's authentic. Okay. Now that's sort of the leadership buzzword today, but
yeah, what does that mean actually?
I think it means being real. It means being who you are. It means recognizing that, you can't, be somebody else or try to be somebody else. And when you do, everybody sees you as a phony. Okay. People see a fake coming a mile away. Okay. And I think being authentic is understanding who you are and sticking to your core values and, growing and learning and getting better at what you are, but don't try to be somebody that you're not. Okay. And I think, that's an essential leadership trait.
Sorry, I was muted there as my dog was barking with a package being delivered.
I've had that happen before.
Yeah, we hear so much about authenticity all the time, and it goes hand in hand with vulnerability and creating a culture of trust. Would you say that during the course of your career, vulnerability was important? For example, saying I don't know, showing emotion at work, was that an important part of your leadership style, or were you kind of that more, kind of like the Jack Welch style of, I got to know all the answer, the typical stereotypical leader?
Yeah, well, I think the smartest guy in the room is the dumbest guy in the room. Okay, and the way out, there's this law of leadership, which is no involvement, no commitment. Okay, and if you want to get people to follow you, the most important thing you can do is to ask them what they think. And, I always believed in defining reality for the team, but
Yeah.
more importantly, defining reality together. So once you get that shared reality and you lay out all the facts, don't withhold the facts. You got to be strong enough and believe in yourself enough to share everything you know about the business. And then ask the question, what would you do if you were me? What would you do if you were running this company?
Yeah.
And then you got to be confident enough that you can handle whatever answers that people provide. Okay?
So you
They
asked
might
that
agree
question,
with you
did
all
you?
the time.
Oh, you did? Okay, interesting.
That's my favorite. That's the most powerful leadership question you can ask. What would you do if you were me?
Yeah.
The most powerful thing you can do is make sure everybody has all the facts that you have in your business. Sam Walton used to say, the more you know, the more you care. Make sure everybody has all the facts. Make sure everybody has the reality of the business. Agree on the reality and then say, hey, what would you do if you were me? When you do that, that unlocks gold.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very vulnerable thing to say too, because I think most leaders, they would never ask that. They would just say, here's what we should do. Go do it.
Well, I think that's how you go from me to we.
Yeah.
Because what's really interesting is 90% of the time, people are going to come to the same conclusion that you do.
Yeah.
And if they're missing something that you see that they don't, then it's your job as a leader to convince them that they need to look at it in that light. Okay? But when you go through that process, you can then have a going forward action plan that says, we, not me.
Yeah.
We, this is what we decided to do. And that's what leadership really is getting people to follow you. But you got to be secure enough to put yourself out there and secure enough to know that once you hear all that feedback of what you would do, that your job then is to synthesize it all and come back to the team and say, this is where we're going. This is what you said. This is what I believe. This is where we're going. I agree with these things that the team says, but you know what? If we don't really start focusing on digital more, or if we don't start doing this, we're going to be left behind. So those are the things that, I think a CEO or a leader has to do.
Have you ever had anybody use one of your vulnerabilities against you? So, somebody said, or you say, what would you do if you were me? Has anybody turned that around and said, hey, David shouldn't be leading this company. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Or if you've been having a bad day or you share something tough that you're going through, has anybody then turned that around and tried to use it against you to take credit away from you? Or
I've never had that happen.
Never
had that happen. Never.
So you,
because the reason is it didn't happen was that while I'm asking for help, I don't think I ever had any doubt or anybody ever had any doubt that I wasn't going to end up with a solution. Okay. That I was going to be able to have a path forward. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I think it basically showed more security. Okay. Now, sometimes you can share something with somebody that you hope that you can trust them and they will betray that trust. Okay. I'm sure that happened, but you know what? I really can't remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember that it happened. There's nothing that was so big in my life. Okay. Happened because of, but I can tell you a lot of big things that happened because I asked people, what would you do if you were me?
Yeah. It seems like correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that helped you become so successful in your career is, like you said, connecting with people, being able to motivate them. And part of that, I mean, did you always also have to open up at work a little bit, let people know more about who you are, what you care about? Did you talk about like your family or personal challenges and struggles? Like, did people know you as more of a human being or just as kind of a leader at the company?
Oh, I think I would hope that they would say they knew me as a human being. Okay.
Yeah.
When I talked about my family, struggles at home and at work,
So you shared that.
Yeah, openly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's not like you do it like you're a basket case and you can't find your way out of it. It's just that you're a real person, you struggle too. And, but I definitely shared what I was wrestling with.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I asked people for help.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a big part of that is you were really good at your job. Had you not been good at the things that you were doing and you kept asking for help, I would imagine it would have been maybe a different story. But like you said, people never had a doubt that you would have a solution, that you would be able to, come up with an idea, overcome the obstacle that was in front of you. Like, you had that confidence where people knew that you were good at what you were doing, not that you were insecure or scared or that you were just not capable.
Yeah. Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
But I think you have to. Leadership is a privilege, and you have to earn the right to lead.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was reading something the other day about empowerment. I always think that empowerment is just an airy-fairy word. It's sort of like how authentic can be to a certain extent. You can take it to the extreme. How do you empower somebody? Well, empowerment, is autonomy is an earned right. Okay. You don't just turn over all this power to people until they've demonstrated an ability to do it. Okay. And that's the art of leadership, is to decide when you can hand the keys over to somebody, so that you can trust them totally to do the job without you. Okay. But I think you obviously have to be you have to be competent enough to do your job. That's why people don't get promoted. People don't get promoted until they've demonstrated a functional expertise, that they've demonstrated that they can do that job well.
Yeah.
Okay. And you usually don't get promoted until other people see you in the job that you're about to go do. Okay. People have got to see you that you can do that job. I remember when somebody at PepsiCo got promoted to be division president, I had all these people call me up and say, "Hey, David, how do you feel about that?" Because I was running operations at Pepsi at the time. "How do you feel about that?" You know what I felt about that? I said, "I'm going to be a division president because other people are seeing me as a division president, and they think I could have had that job too."
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I think it's a very powerful way to change your mindset and how you think, and prime yourself for success. I know we only have a couple minutes left, and you have so many really interesting and fascinating stories. What's your favorite one? I was very tempted to ask you about the creation of Cool Ranch, because I actually don't know that story, and I don't know if that's one of your favorite stories or not. But do you have a particular favorite story during your career?
Yeah, I love Cool Ranch Doritos just like you do. It's one of my favorite products.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that story.
Well, when I was working with Frito-Lay on the agency side, it was clear to me that Frito-Lay needed a real shot in the arm, and the Doritos brand in particular. Nacho Cheese Doritos had done really well, but the growth is starting to slow down a little bit, okay? And line extensions and packaged goods are very important. So I said to my team, I said, we got to come up with a new flavor idea for Frito-Lay. And I said, let's go to the grocery store, okay? And I want us to go through all the aisles in the grocery stores. Let's look and see what's going on together as a team, okay? And we didn't really focus on the snack aisle. We went through the snack aisle, but what we really focused on, believe it or not, was the salad dressing line.
Oh, interesting.
Because that's where there's all kinds of flavors. And the hottest flavor at the time, the fastest growing new flavor that was really taking off was ranch flavored salad dressings. Okay. So I came back and I said, geez, I called Dennis Hurd, who was the head of R&D at Frito-Lay, and said, I got an idea for a line extension I think could be pretty cool for Doritos. My team, we went out and this ranch flavored salad dressings are kicking butt. I said, what do you think? What do you think if could we make a ranch flavored Doritos? And he said, sure, we could. So he went to work on it. He came up with a prototype, and God, these things were delicious. And then we launched it, and it's a huge, huge success, and still a huge success today. But I always tell everybody, the important thing about this from a leadership perspective is you got to build know-how, okay? And you got to learn from what's going on around you and be a pattern thinker. And all we did was just go to the salad dressing aisle and say, hey, if it's successful here, how can we make that successful in chips? And guess what we did? We came up with this, billion-dollar idea. I mean, I did the same thing by taking my team at Pizza Hut to California Pizza Kitchen. They had all these specialty pizzas, Thai chicken pizza, barbecue chicken pizza, all these, specialty. You've been to there, So I said, look, we don't have all these kinds of toppings on our Pizza Hut make table, but what can we do that's similar that could give us some product news. So we decided, this is the first time anybody had ever done it, believe it or not, Jacob. We decided to double the number of pepperonis and create a product called Pepperoni Lovers. And then we created meat lovers and cheese lovers and veggie lovers. And this became the lovers line of pizza. And it's the largest mix on the menu of pizza today. Okay. Now, all it was is bringing what I call a unique image to a known quantity. Okay. And that's when you do that, you find marketing nirvana. Okay. Because people like things that are new yet familiar. I mean, and that's when you really hit the gold.
Crazy. I mean, you have so many. I feel like we need to have you back for another episode one of these days, because you just have story after story, lesson after lesson. Maybe before we wrap up and ask you where people can go to connect with you, what do you think the greatest leadership lesson has been during your career that you want other people to take away with them?
Well, my greatest leadership lesson is purposeful recognition. Okay. And I learned very, very quickly that it's really important to find out, what are the big dynamics, okay, that really what behaviors drive your business? What are the key things that if people do these things, you will get great results, okay? Well, define what they are. In our business, we define them as believing in all people, being customer maniacs, positive energy, recognition. We had a number of different things, okay, that were really critical to really making a restaurant company go. And so what I did was basically create a culture where we recognized the heck out of all those behaviors. Not just me, but everybody else in the company. And when you do that, guess what happens? People do more of it. If people know you're looking for innovation, you're going to get innovation. If people know that deadlines are important to you, if you're in engineering and being on budget's important and that's a key behavior, then guess what? Okay? If you recognize people who do that, you'll make sure that people do it. I think that purposeful recognition is really, really key. So, I learned about recognition and the power of it through Bob. Okay. But what really differentiated what I did and how I implemented recognition is I tied it to the behaviors that were absolutely critical to the success of the business.
I love it.
When you do that, your recognition is purposeful. You just don't, you're not just recognizing people to be a good guy. You recognize people for purpose.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think that's a tremendous lesson. And you're right. It's not just about recognizing people, but it's recognizing them for something specific that aligns with kind of the behaviors that you're looking for. David, where can people go to learn more about you, your book, your podcast, anything that you want to mention for people to check out?
Well, first of all, go to howleaderslead.com for our podcast. And, I post a new podcast every Thursday with a top leader. Last week it was Shantanu Narayan from Adobe. The week prior to that was, I think it was. I've had Dave Cody in the past month from Boeing. Top-notch CEOs, top-notch leaders. So go to howleaderslead.com. For the book, you can learn more about the book by going to takechargeofyou.com. It comes out March 22nd, and then. You mentioned Twitter earlier. I do a daily inspirational tweet. On Twitter every morning. I get up and try to share something that I've learned or an insight.
Yeah.
And so you can go to David Novak Ogo and follow me there for that as well. And I also post my podcast on my Twitter account as well.
Very cool. Well, David, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share your insights with me. We'll definitely make sure to have you back again one of these days. So thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on all your success and your book. And you seem to be doing fantastic things.
Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for tuning in. My guest again has been David Novak, and I will see all of you next time. Thanks again for tuning into today's episode. Please remember to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or whatever your preferred channel is. I cannot express how important those reviews and ratings are to the success of this show, and they keep allowing me to bring back amazing guests. Lastly, don't forget to check out the brand new PDF that I just put out, which looks at the evolution of the employee. In other words, how employees are evolving and changing and what you as an organization should do to adapt. You'll get a complete breakdown of what that evolution looks like, as well as action items that you can and should be taking. That PDF is available at thefutureemployee.com. And if you want to reach out to me for whatever reason, whether it's inviting me to speak, sponsoring the show, or just giving me some feedback, you can always do so. My email is jacob@thefutureorganization.com. Again, that's jacob@thefutureorganization.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.